Hello, everyone. Welcome to LitRPG Audiobook Podcast. That's my Mrs. Doubtfire voice. I am Ray, your humble audiobook reviewer, and I'll be reviewing some recent and classic LitRPG audiobooks for you. Today, I'm going to begin with Warden Nova Online by Alex Knight, narrated by Todd Boyce, and a book length of 10 hours and 45 minutes.
A good idea, not by any means, but it was the right thing to do. Once again, he found himself acting without thinking, moving from his seat to plop down next to Titus. "That was a rough first mission, huh?" Kaiden said, realizing just how bad he was at small talk.
"You like to state the obvious, don't you?"
"Well, it's one of my favorite pastimes," Kaiden said, not making much sense, but not caring either. He was too distracted watching the rest of the shuttle, trying to see if anyone was looking their way.
"I'm going to have plenty of time to waste on useless conversations while I serve out the rest of my sentence," Titus said. "So why don't you give me these last few moments of peace before they kick me out of the program?"
Fair enough, Kaiden said, then patted him on the shoulder. As he did, he let 3 crystals fall from his hand and into the man's lap.
Now, this is a story about a young fellow named Caden who gets framed for the murder of his only friend. And once he's imprisoned, he actually gets drafted into the Warden program, which is a program in which the inmates are made into a virtual police force in a game called Nova Online to help players who get themselves into trouble. Now, if that seems a little silly, drafting criminals to be a police corps and players needing help to survive in their game, you're right. It really is. It's kind of crazy. Why would you ever, as a player, ask for assistance from other players, when you should be playing the game and getting experience? And why would you ever expect criminals, who are in jail, in prison, to be able to be a police force of any kind of substance or quality? Well, it really makes sense that, the first part anyway, when you consider that if you're killed in the game, then you are locked out of play for 7 days. Okay, so if you're paying a lot of money to play, and the game generates a lot of cash for the state, you need to think of the state as a Cold War Russia style place, with that kind of attitude with the state oppressing people. Then you want to keep the players alive for the cash generation. As players, you're paying for that time that you're allowed to get into the game, whether you're able to get in or not. So you want to be able to survive and play and not lose a week's playtime. So you're going to call for help. So it all comes together pretty well. It's surprisingly how well it works. Additionally, if you consider the incarcerated people, these are people you don't have to pay. Don't have to pay those guys at all. Whereas if you hired actual gamers to police the game, it would cost some money. And why would the state want to put some money into something when they can make people do it for nothing? So there's a real logic to it. Now, one of the benefits is that by playing, Caden has an opportunity to shave off some of his 50-year sentence he's gotten for the murder he was framed for. Okay, he ends up with 2 teammates and begins to slowly unravel who is the killer of his friend and who framed him. And I mean, this guy was framed like, the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, if that's where the Mona Lisa is. I should look that up. I should do some research. That would be the proper thing for me to do. Why am I saying that? You're going to see. Okay? As a Lovecraftian maniac, I really enjoyed the voice spawn. These are like nightmarish monsters that come right out of the attitude of H.P. Lovecraft, and they were fun. You'll like Caden and his compatriots. They have some really excellent battles. And the story is, for the most part, spent in the game with a few prison scenes thrown in. So this is sort of like the Shawshank Redemption, but blended with the Colonial Marines from Aliens. The book has some excellent fight scenes and a fun chase scene. We also pretty much have only about 6 real characters that rotate in and out of the book, with several background players popping in and out at various times. So you get some character growth, and it also makes it easy to spot the villain of the story, though. It's pretty simple. There's only so many people you can pick from. Either way, I really enjoyed the book itself. The story was interesting, it was intriguing, and like I say, it had a lot of character development, and the characters play well off each other. So it's not a bad book. Now, me saying that, Boyce, the narrator, is a bit of a conundrum. I enjoyed his reading style immensely. The voices that he did were fantastic. I thought that he played the narration really smoothly and kept the story right on track. He handled the action scenes so well, and he did one heck of an impression of a drill sergeant. I mean, it's almost like in between, Sergeant Carter from Gomer Pyle and Arlie Emery from the Full Metal Jacket movie. It's such a midline. It's so good. And you'll know he sounds just like a drill sergeant. It was perfect. However, he did what I consider to be a rookie mistake. And I'm going to say, given that he's narrated only 7 books in total thus far, I believe that's what the case is here. Okay, it's a rookie error, but it's an error that should never have happened. Boyce really, really, really needs, and I don't know if I can stress that enough, but he really needs to learn how to pronounce words that he's unfamiliar with, and not power on through what he assumes it should sound like. If he was hooked on phonics, he has not done a good job, because he has gotten off the train for phonics. Now, my first inclination of how things were going to go came when he was mispronouncing a word, thrumming, as in the line, his heart was thrumming faster than. He said it as thruming instead of thrumming. I physically stopped because I was unfamiliar with that word. I hit my Audible app, backed it up 30 seconds, and listened to it again, and then the connotation of the heart beating fast struck me, and I said, oh, his heart is thrumming, like a hummingbird's heart thrums, okay? Simple. No big deal. But then, later on, not long after that, he said business magnet instead of magnate, which earned a giggle, but they were two things that chuffed me a wee bit. Now, his biggest sin, and I mean, if you want to talk about a sin, was his constant mispronunciation of the word ensign. This word was used more than I would have thought possible in a book. Okay? It just popped up 3 times in a sentence or 6 times in a paragraph. It was like used for no discernible reason in such a frequency that I think that Knight really enjoyed the word. Seriously, it was just crazy how often he said it, because every time he said it, it was like a dagger in my ear. Okay? The word was just jarring and annoying, and he pronounced the word ensign as ensigns. Yep, not ensign, ensigns. E-N and ensigns. This became my N-word. Every time I heard it, it ticked me off, okay? I was just peeved. And I don't want to equate ensign to the N-word, but I mean, honestly, ensign was just so unbelievable. I kept saying, who the hell talks like that? And I literally had to question whether Knight had written a new rank for the players. But then after I heard lieutenant and sergeant and, colonel and all this, I knew it wasn't colonel and it wasn't lieutenant and it wasn't ensign. It was just ensign was being mispronounced. Seriously, if Boyce had watched 5 minutes of any episode of the first 2 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation, he wouldn't have had to shut up, Wesley, because he would know that the word is ensign. And that's a big break for me, because every time that word was used, it took me right out of the book. The magnate thing, I can understand that, because that might be something that Knight wrote rather than he mispronounced. Still, if I was narrating the book and I read that line, I would have said the proper word. I would have changed it to magnate rather than glossing over it. Okay? Honestly, I know the difference between magnet and magnate, and anybody who has any kind of a reading background will. And as a narrator, it's your job to know how to pronounce words. If you're not familiar with it, don't gloss. Don't skip. Don't assume. Read those words. And the other thing that he did was the word riposte. Riposte means a quick return thrust following a parry. It's one of those things that if you're any kind of fan of fencing, you would know. Any kind of sword fight, they have riposte talked about all the time, okay? and he pronounces it like it was rhyming with riposte. I kept thinking of like pasta. At the end, I wanted some spaghetti and, some bow ties. It's not riposte, it's riposte. And given the frequency that he used this power in the book, the main character, Caden, you're going to hear that word a lot. It's not as often as the annoying end sign, but it's there. Either way, I don't know whose fault lies where when it comes to the magnate thing. So I'm going to let him slide on that. But with the riposte ensign, I can't let it go. This is a book with military jargon. Do your research. It's like saying the rank of sergeant, like sergeant, because sergeant is Sergeant. Sergeant. So would you say sergeant if you weren't familiar with that word? I doubt it. I think you would know it was sergeant if you looked it up or you learned how to go Google it for 5 minutes. It doesn't take a lot of time. Now, I suppose this is kind of like the audiobook version of spelling and grammatical errors. I don't read the books. I listen to them. And just like if you had gotten this book and it was full of typos and misspellings, it would just drive you right out of the story. This is the same thing it did here. This is a really good book. It was fun. It was exciting. I enjoyed it until the word ensign came up or riposte. When those things happened, I was like, I just can't do this. It just made me lose my mind. It was not fun at all. Otherwise, the book was a fun escape. Okay, now I will say that, once I got back into the story, I was back into it and it was fine. And I'll definitely be on the lookout for book 2. I'm praying to God that Knight or Boyce hear this or see this and go back and fix it, because if the next book does this, I will not continue the series. I mean, that's just it. I will not, because I can't do that again, because it drove me so insane. Like, seriously, if my son had used the word ensign, I would have smacked him, is the way I was feeling at that point. If he was saying, hey, Ensign Wesley Crusher, whap, it would just come out of nowhere. And then I would have said, I'm sorry, because you said that right. Then he wouldn't have understood the thing had happened. But it would have happened to me, because that's the way he made me feel. Okay? The book was at least a solid 8 stars, maybe more. Okay? It could have been higher. But I had to shave points off for the incessant incorrect pronunciations that filled the book. And I hate to do that to a good story, but the fact is, it was jarring and not fun to listen to. Now, honestly, it would have been much higher, much, much higher, but I'm going to give this a 7.8 stars, and I'm doing that as a generous person. I've been really hard on some books lately, and I'm trying to be a nice guy and not crush something just because there was something a little bit off, but bad narration just kills it for me. Just kills it. And I really, really felt like I wanted to go a lot lower, but it's not fair to the story or the writer of this book, because the story is good, the writing is good, but the narration just chops it. And so I'm going to say 7.8 stars. Hopefully next time around, Boyce does some research or Knight does some audio checks, because it was a decent, well-written story, and you will enjoy it if you can just get past those mispronunciations things. Okay? Have fun, guys. Good luck with it. I hope you really enjoy the book. It's a decent story. You should have fun with it. Okay, next up is Initializing, Somnia Online Book 1 by K.T. Hanna, narrated by the amazing Andrea Parsonal, and the book's length is 12 hours and 11 minutes.
Bellius pulled it open, his mouth agape and his eyes much darker than she'd seen before. There was a tension surrounding him she'd not yet witnessed, and she had to stop herself from taking a step back. But his expression changed when he focused on her. "Oh, Murmur, come in, come in. My, he said as he closed the door behind her. You've come a long way. And look at you, keeping your thoughts far quieter this time around. I'd actually have to put effort in if I wanted to read your mind." "It's not like you gave me pointers." Murmur could tell tiredness was coming through in her tone, but Bellius didn't seem to mind. Instead, he just chuckled in his jovial way. "I have a letter for you." She knew she was being irritable, but that last mob had really taken it out of her. And yet, she didn't hate being an enchanter like she'd expected to. So many tools at her disposal.
Initializing is one of those rare books that really has no end game. There's no antagonist, no real big battle scenes. But somehow, it's interesting nonetheless. It has a great twist at the end that you can pick up on if you pay attention to the way the main character, Murmur, interacts with the others and the powers that she begins to wield and the way others treat her in the game. But you have to really be on point, okay? I'm just giving you a warning. Pay attention. You might be able to figure it out. I personally figured it out during the bathroom scene, and maybe I was a bit slow, but it was rewarding to see that my hypothesis, or hypothesis, as some people I know would say, in the words of the heavy Jake Sullivan from Larry Correa novel, hypothesis panned out to be correct. No spoilers for me, okay? Can't do that to you. You will enjoy this book. Hannah is fantastic at fleshing out her characters and their relationships, such as those between Murmur and Sinister, Murmur her instructor-mentor, and Murmur and her dragon pal. Each is unique and realistically rendered. The only issue I really had was I had to wonder when Sin ever left the game. And you'll see what I'm talking about when you listen to the book. Normally, I would complain that this book was just one long bit of grinding, because that's really what it is. And that it also lacks a villain to latch onto, although there is a player that gives Murmur some grief. What the book actually is about is Murmur coming to grips with herself before school starts, rekindling friendships, and unraveling a mystery that only she seems to notice. There's a movie out there that stars the ex-wife of Tom Cruise that this put me in the mind of, and I don't want to spoil things for you. The grindy thingy, as Scott Pilgrim would say, is actually fun as Murmur and company get to test their ever-growing powers as they beat on monsters and accrue XP. And they're not power levelers. They keep up with just about everybody. They may be a little bit ahead of some people, but they're on par with most of the players in the game. So this is not a case of we power leveled and power leveled. They just play, and they play really well. And as you know, the group does not advance their levels so quickly that they power level, like I said, because that's a real no-no in my book. I hate it when power leveling takes place. Nope, the real fun comes in piecing together the mystery that Murmur slowly senses around her and seeing as just who is a part of the conspiracy. The best part of it was I was certain that Sinister was going to tell Murmur that she was in love with her. Now, you'll get to see whether I was right or wrong. I was shocked. I was really shocked because that was not what I expected. Like I said, I figured it out later, what was the big mystery. But this thing here, you'll see why I think these things. So keep an eye open and an ear to the ground to see if you can figure out what the big reveal is before it gets to the end. The fabulous Andrea Parsenau narrates this and just kills the narration. I'm so glad to be able to review a book that has such a solid narrator that I don't have to describe just how they brought the story down or how they had problems pronunciating, instead of pronunciating, they're pronunciating words, because that's what it was like in the other books I just told you. Nope, Andrea elevates an already great story to even higher levels. She portrays these characters so well and is flawless in her readings. The sound quality is superb, and she enlivens the dialogue between Sin and Murmur to the point where you believe they are two distinct people, but also that they are very dear friends. You can feel their bond. She portrays that with her voice, not from the story, from their voices. You can feel the care and concern. Like I said, I almost thought there was a budding romance in there, and I swear, I might not be wrong about this because there's never an answer about that, but that's how it sounded to me, okay? Parsenau really, really, really plays this out perfectly. I mean, I give her a lot of credit, and she's a fantastic narrator, okay? One thing that I liked is that while this is basically one long gaming session, it is neither bogged down by the grinding, nor does it try to be overly cerebral, okay? Because sometimes certain types of writers become very cerebral, and here Murmur just tends to outthink her opponents, but also puts a good smackdown on them in the process. She's not one to be trifled with, and it is clear to see why she is a leader and not a follower. She is a very complex character, one that narration by Parsenau helps to flesh out even more, and she's one character that I really want to see more of and cannot wait for the next edition of this book to come out. This is a solid book that stands out for what it doesn't have or do with the characters. There's not a lot of books, I will tell you, that didn't have a bad guy, there's no main villain that didn't have really a plot point to get to at the end, because it doesn't have, we've got to stop this monster from doing this. None of that stuff. There's none of that. It's just really, there's a mystery and there's gameplay. And it still is some rock solid story. And that's really, really rare. I don't know if you realize that most stories are not like that when it comes to LitRPG. It's usually, we've got to, go and beat this contest, or we've got to stop this monster, or this, this is going to happen if we don't do this. That is more of the LitRPG trope, so to speak, with things. And KT Hanna really shuns all of that, and she shoves it off to the side and gives you a very cerebral but fulfilling book with lots of fights. Okay, it's not short on fights. There's blood spilt, and it gives you something way better than a bad guy. And there is a character in there that you could say he's a minor villain, and that's fine. He's more of a jerk than anything else, but he's not an antagonist by any stretch of the means. So, like I say, the book is just, it's a solid piece of writing from start to finish. It is a solid narration from start to finish. You feel the friendship, the bonds, you feel the love between the characters. I mean, it is there. There's no doubt in my mind. When I listened to that, I was like, holy crap, Andrea just nailed these people. Now, I didn't know if I'd enjoy this book or not, and I'm really glad I tried it out. I knew nothing of KT Hanna, but I figured if Andrea liked your book enough, that it had to be of some substance. So, like I said, the book is a winner all the way through. I'm going to award 8.25 stars. It's a great book. It's a first book in a series. I think it's going to improve and get better. And with the big reveal at the end, if you have figured it out, great, good job. If not, you're going to be surprised, because it's a good twist. It's a really, really good twist. I look forward to more from this narrating pair in the future. It's a great, great, great book. And I wish I had more to say about it, but I think I've summed it up pretty well. All right, one more book I'm going to sneak in before we get to the end. It is Jessica's Challenge, Book 5 in the Puatera Online. It's written by two people this time around, Dawn Chapman and Jess Montefield, and it's narrated by Suzanne Barbetta, with a length of 3 hours and 24 minutes.
With nothing else to do while I waited, I closed my eyes and remembered how I'd felt when I'd made the wind swirl in Desiree's plant room. Almost immediately, I felt a breeze on my cheeks. A grin spread across my face. It grew broader as the blast of air grew stronger. As my head began to swim, a flashing splotch appeared in my vision. I shut off my magic. Nausea rolled over me as I clutched my chair. I had a feeling I'd pushed myself too hard. I could only hope it wasn't something I'd regret later. By the time the feeling had passed, I found myself staring at the food and drink. No one else had touched it, but that didn't mean I couldn't. As soon as the water touched my lips, I started to feel better. The splotch that still hung, as if it were part of the game mechanics, grew smaller, making it clear I was fending something off.
Now, Puatera Online and Dawn Chapman, they hold a very special place in my heart. I came to the series right after I discovered LitRPG genre. And I don't mean I discovered it in the sense that Columbus discovered America, because it was already there. I mean that I just sort of stumbled onto this magical thing called LitRPG, and Dawn was really there to guide me through it. Puatera was a very different story from the other books I had read thus far. It was sci-fi based, a plus for me, okay? And it starred an NPC rather than a player. That was a hook that I could really sink my teeth into. I could enjoy that. Dawn herself was incredibly open to her fans and has always found time to answer any questions or to let me know when her next book was coming out. I've appreciated her ever since, okay? She's a great person, great writer, and she is a fantastic storyteller. Jessica's Challenge returns to the format that I was accustomed to in the first three books. The book length is back to a 3-hour listen, which is really great for someone like me who loves I love a nice amuse-bouche as much as a feast, okay? Dawn does really well with short burst stories. Novellas are really, really her style. I mean, she kills it. And that isn't to imply that she can't write a great full-length book. I mean, just look at book 4, Killer's Reign. She nailed it. But she has a real skill real skill in packing a lot of material into 3-hour bites. And that's a talent, because not everybody can do this. For me, this means that there's never a lull or a break in her book that a longer version might have. She gets to jam it full of action, emotion, adventure. And man, does she manage to do that here along with Montefield's help. I'll be honest, I always get a little leery of collaborations. Sometimes the voices don't mix well, but that isn't the case for Jessica's challenge. Nope, their voices meld together wonderfully, okay? And I've said that, I think, a few times now, mostly when it comes to James Hunter. I think he's an incredible writer who, his work, really blends well with other people's writing styles. Here, these two work together just wonderfully. It's a masterful storytelling, and the story flows so smoothly. All right, at this point, you're probably asking what the book's about, right? Hey, Ray, tell me about it. Well, it's about 3 sisters who accidentally enter Puatera for real and struggle to find one another and a way home. And when I mean struggle, I mean they struggle, okay? The story is, just as I said earlier, it's emotional, it's adventurous, and it's undoubtedly dangerous. All I could think of is this will teach them to stay out of their mom's lab. They go through a hell of a lot, okay, which amazes me for the time span that we have to work with. It didn't feel like 3 hours, and that's, like I say, that's really Chapman's forte. She crunches stuff down into one really nice bite, that moosh boosh I'm talking about, okay? While the book flew by pleasantly, it felt like there was way more to it. This was a tightly written piece that really impressed me. I love the Puatera series and cannot wait for the next book. As for the narration, Suzanne Barbetta is a new narrator to me. And I appreciate that Dawn continues to introduce me to all these wonderful new readers of words. I would never have heard of Annalise Rennie if she hadn't shifted the tone of her book with new narrators. And all I can say is that when Maddie returns, though, we better get Andrea Parsnell back for that. Otherwise, it just won't be Maddie. I hope you hear me, Dawn. I really do hope you hear me. Anyway, I digress. Barbetta does a really fine job, and she's really pleasant to listen to. Like my pop used to say, she is sweet on the ears. Well, I don't think that's exactly what he said. Something similar to that, though. So she's sweet on the ears. She has very distinctive voices and rarely distinguishes between who is speaking with the tone of her voice. I enjoyed hearing her for the first time, and I welcome her heartily to the LitRPG community. I think she'll fit right in. As always, the writing is smooth and fun, and the characters, although they are not Maddie, are interesting, and you connect with them right away. This was a fun book, and it only adds to the Puatera world. All I can say is I hope Dawn can keep up this amazing series, because Puatera is a very fun place to visit now and again. Now, I know there's another book 6 out. I haven't gotten it yet. I'm planning on doing that soon, and it'll be showing up sometime in the future. So just wait for that. As for my ratings, man, I keep saying I hate these ratings. I never know how to convey how much I love a book or hate a book with a number. I think you just know by now how I act when I do my reviews, but if I have to, if you need a number that bad, then I'll say this is probably the best book in the series so far, just in terms of concept and how things played out. And I'm going to give it 8.25 stars. If you haven't read the series, this could be a standalone book. It's a perfect starting place for someone new to jump in. Just don't miss out. Go back and start with the early books. You will love Maddie. You won't be sorry. But yeah, 8.25, I think that there's a few things that could have been a little bit improved upon. Not much, but I mean, nothing's perfect. And this book was it was a fun read. I enjoyed it so much. And I appreciate Dawn putting these things out there for us to enjoy. So thank you guys. Get this book and listen to it. All right, so what's the next book coming up, guys? The final book of the night. You're going to love this. It is War Aeternus 3, The Culling by Charles Dean, narrated by Jeff Hayes and Annie Ellicott. And the book's length is an amazing 11 hours and 50 minutes.
I'm sorry to bother you, Lord Lee, but... His voice trailed off as he looked over at the girl. She insisted on being here. She said that she wouldn't leave unless we forced her to. Or unless she got to speak to you first. Despite her seeming persistence in meeting him, she hadn't even so much as looked up when he came down the stairs. When did she arrive? Lee asked. Last night, a little after the moon started making its way down the sky again, the man answered. His eyes darted between the mysterious woman and Lee as if checking to make sure that she couldn't overhear what he was saying. We tried to treat her, We called on the healing women to come and help her with her wounds, but she wouldn't let us. She fought off any attempt to treat her, almost becoming violent, so we figured we'd end up hurting her more than helping her if we pressed the matter. I see, Lee responded, now studying the girl. She looked like a broken vessel more than an actual person, and he wondered if, somewhere in that break, her spirit had escaped and there was nothing left. It was the hollow, haunted look in her eyes that gave her away.
Okay, so guys, before I begin, I have to do a prayer. I have to pray to Augustus because I need a really good beverage to help me get through this series. This review here, okay? So give me a moment. Great God, Augustus, Lord of beer and crafting, bring all your powers to me and provide me with a tasty beverage of godly quality that only Lee, your greatest herald, can make for this divine justice giver of yours. I beg of you. Now this is what I call service. Thank you, Augustus. And it looks like it's even from my favorite place to drink. Cheers. Good stuff. So, I guess by now you realize that Lee and the surviving team returned for book 3. And all I can say is that this is a welcome return after the big kick in the feels that Dean gave us in the last book. One thing I will say about the Lord of Beards is that he knows how to entertain us. We are entertained, Charles. After the events in the last novel, Lee is in a real funk, and he's not looking to break out of it anytime soon. He doesn't care. He's just out in a bad way. To say that the quality of his mercy is strained would be a complete understatement. This leads to one of the funniest scenes in the book, in which Lee and the amazing Miller rush to defend the monument that Lee built at the end of book 2. Sorry, spoilers and all that, so I really can't reveal anything, but there are 2 moments in which Miller totally steals the show. Okay, the first comes from the eating of the nobleman's heart. It's just fantastic. The other is the spear to the face, and Miller playing the thing off with the line, "Well, you said to kill anyone moving towards the statue." I burst out laughing so hard and for so long. I literally laughed heartily for probably 10 minutes after the scene was played out, and just it kind of tittered out to me, just having giggles like a little girl. Okay, I admit I'm a Miller junkie, and if I'm being honest, the only complaint that I have about this book in any way, shape, or form is that there's just not enough Miller. Now, I can't tell you why, but he's missing for a big chunk of it. And there's reasons I just can't reveal. Ooh, man, that beer was just kicking. But every moment I had with him, I completely cherished. Now, thankfully, Lee keeps things interesting as he goes around killing blind children and old people. This is the Culling, after all. So, while this might sound a little controversial, it is simultaneously funny, heartbreaking, horrifying, and moving, as Lee is only doing what he must, even if he feels it's wrong. Meanwhile, poor Augustus. Man, Augustus is probably my second favorite character in this series, by far. I mean, this is a guy that pretty much just goes around doing whatever he wants to do and has no consequences for anything, and he doesn't care because he knows it'll never bother him. And so why not just be himself? He's either a monkey or a bear. Who wouldn't want to be a bear when they want to watch TV and eat some popcorn? That's pretty cool. But poor Augustus is getting his butt chewed off for having a herald who goes around killing other heralds, which is something that's really weird because in this little game they're playing with the gods, one of the aspects of the game is that eventually you've got to whack the other heralds in some capacity. So, man, I think Augustus kind of, he's very nonplussed about the whole situation. Now, I have to say that Dean introduces a new character, Jade, who could be a Patty Duke-styled cousin to the Bathrobe Knight's Stephanie. She is a totally fun character, totally fun, who has no issue speaking her mind and lives as if she were in a manga anime series, and just so happens to see the non-heralds as NPCs who are not real, and therefore she can kill them anytime she's annoyed by them. Her POV is different, to say the least. You can tell that Charles had an absolute blast writing her, and that Lee is in some serious trouble with her as companion. I mean, that's an understatement. I mean, he's doomed, okay? Just doomed. Dean is almost making a harem for Lee, but he's just not biting bait, okay? We have Ling, Bridget, Jade, but out of all the girls he knows, Masha is probably the best and most practical choice for Lee, in my humble opinion. I really like that character, and I think she has an emotional tie with her that all the others lack. I mean, seriously, she's just got some real depth, and it's not just her. It's her family, her father. There's a lot of stuff there in the real world that just is way better than Ling or Bridget, even Jade. Jade is great. I would marry Masha, and if you wanted to say, were you going to play MFK, Masha's the one I would marry, okay? I think that Lee has an emotional tie. Marry Masha. I love Jade as a character, but she is far too crazy town for me. Like I said, she reminds me of Stephanie, and while both I and my kids loved Stephanie in the Bathrobe Night, we would not want to marry her. No way. She is crazy trained, off the rails, over the crevasse, into the water, and out on a jet ski like nothing happened crazy. Okay? She is bat crap crazy, and there is no getting around it. Could she improve? Probably, but that would kind of take away from her character. And I just think that she's really good as she is. But her designs on Lee, she does think she's going to end up marrying him. I don't know if I can handle that or not. In fact, just the thought of that makes me think I need another drink. Maybe one more. Now I feel like Miller again. I'm rejuvenated. Like I said, we loved Stephanie, but no one would want to hang out with her for a long period of time because of all the bouncy, trouncy, fun that she is full of. And I don't know how you could get around it. I really don't. She's a cool character, though. You got to give Dean that. She's a really cool character. Now, the story is really fast-paced, and we finally get back to Satterfield. Finally, a whole book away, we never saw anything. Now we're back to Satterfield. Lee gets to know the AI in the game a little bit better, and the hero he faces off against is about as zippity-doo-dah crazy as you can get. And I don't think there was ever a moment that this book dragged or shuffled his feet. Hell, I was pulled along at breakneck speed, and there was an awesome fight that was taking place or danger that was looming in the corner at every given moment. The book is so tightly written that it fulfills every need for comedy, action, adventure. Emotion? Yeah, there's emotion there too. And it has big events. See, it's got everything. It's got everything. Okay? Dean just continues to step up his game. Through the hoop, nothing but net. He's got it. Okay? I see him improve in every book he's written. And I mean that from book 1 of The Bathrobe Night all the way to Aeternus now. He's gotten better as a writer. He has tighter plots, better pacing, and his characters are just so much, how do I put this? They're so believable, and they're so fun, and they're very interesting, and they hold your attention. I know a lot of books that have characters that you would think, meh, but if you want the truth of it, there are times when Dean's secondary characters could totally steal the whole book away from Lee. Honestly, I mean, Miller, Augustus, Jade, you name them. All of them are really interesting characters. Augustus could have his own book. Miller should have his own book. One of those side questy things. Talk to James Hunter about that, will you, Dean? I mean, honestly, Charles, please, because I really need a Miller book. Just because. Just because I need more Miller. Okay. Any of those characters could hold a book all unto themselves. And I'm not kidding. And all I can figure out is that some way, somehow, he's going to make Aeternus 4 even more amazing. Okay? I mean, there's just, I don't see how you can get better than this, but I know he's going to do it with Aeternus 4. I have no complaints on the word front. None at all. I mean, it is just a killer story. Now, as for the narration, I have to say, I have never heard Jeff Hayes do better, okay? I don't think there's another person who could pull off Jade the way that he does. Sincerely, okay? There are multiple reasons why Jeff is amazing, and his ability to do believable female voices is but one of them. But here, he hits the attitude and the exuberance that is Jade, like he grew up with her as a kid, or she was his sister, for Pete's sake. I mean, he nails this character so well, it's scary. Between his performance of her and that of Miller, I don't know how Lee ever gets his own voice. You know, I mean, honestly, Lee is a great character. If he was in a book all unto himself, I would be touting how cool a character he was. But you've got him surrounded by people like Ling and Jade and Dave. I mean, they're all really great characters. And not that Lee doesn't carry the book, because Lee totally does. He really pulls the book along. But Jeff is the reason that these characters stand out so well. And I think that he helps along the characterizations of these people with his voice. I mean, Jade definitely steals the show. As much as I love Miller, I think that you can't help but listen to Jade for a second and say, where the hell did she come from? Of course, I know she's Stephanie. There's no way you can convince me otherwise. I mean, he took some Stephanie DNA and dropped her into Jade, okay? Now here, Annie plays a fine Bridget, and she also plays a really, I mean, the Herald that she plays is fantastic, but the other one that she plays, and I'll call this one the Crazy Chicken Lady, because when she was doing this voice, all I could see was the chicken lady from the Kids in the Hall. I mean, it was just that crazy. You know, if you know the character, you know that the character is goofy, crazy, and just whack job. And that's that character right there in a nutshell. And she plays them so well. She hits them like she was a gas-powered hammer. I like the chemistry that Annie and Jeff have. They don't work together so much as they blend flawlessly with one another. They go together like water in a Kool-Aid packet, like peas and carrots. Peas and carrots. Okay, as always, the sound production is just as exemplary as the book. And it is as clear as Crystal Lake right after the summer break. You know, like right after the police come in and clean up all the bodies and get all the leaves raked up and put away all the little weapons that, you know, you might find, like a pitchfork or a machete, and it's all pristine again. That's how pristine this sound quality is. I'm just telling you, it's scary how clean it is. Because SBT has the highest quality standards when it comes to storytelling that you can ask for. And it's pretty obvious when you listen to them, okay? Now, Aeternus, the Culling, literally cut away every single weak moment that it had. And it left us with the most choice cut of pure Kobe beef you could ask for. The story had real meat on its bones, and I happily dug in and asked for thirds when it was all over with. I'm going to give this book a 9. It is a solid, surprising, funny, poignant book. I could not have asked for or expected more. And again, I'm going to reiterate this. I've been saying this a lot lately. The numbers to me don't mean jack. I could say it was 90 out of 100, okay, or 9,000 out of 10,000. To me, 9 is about as perfect as you can get. Now, unless it's a crappy book, and then when I say it's a 5 out of 10, I mean it's a 5 out of 10. Okay, but 9 is just about as good as I can see it being. For it to go higher than that, I have to kind of get a little something I wasn't expecting out of it, okay? And this book hits me in so many levels. It's just pure perfection in the audible form. And again, I haven't read the book. I listened to it, so I don't know how the writing is in my head if I read it. But I'm telling you, I wouldn't even want to go back and read the book now because how perfect the conjunction with the writing and the narration is. I mean, it's just amazing. So please, please, go out, get book 1, 2, 3. Tell your friends, because they're going to appreciate that you hooked them on this thing. Guaranteed it. And enjoy. And wait for book 4. He's writing really fast. I give Charles Dean a lot of credit because he's cranking these books out at a pace that just astounds me. Okay, I love the independent literary world because these people who are not beholden to a publishing company can put out more than one book a year. Okay, and Dean is nailing this. I know he's already got a cover for book 4, or he's about to. I know book 4 is coming soon. Let's just sit down and wait for it, and you'll want to after you read this book. So get it, guys. You won't be sorry. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I really appreciate you taking your time to watch or listen to the show. If you want to support us, we would ask that you could go and like the LitRPG Podcast Facebook page or the YouTube page, or just share and like the video. Also, I would ask if you could to please leave a comment below. I like to get feedback and see how I can improve, and anything I can do to make the show better, that's what I'm going to listen to. So make sure you leave a comment, and I'll be happy to get back to you. For the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast, I'm Ray. Keep listening. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Thank you.